Good morning, greetings, and welcome, fellow wanderers. 7 years ago, while hiking alone, I got lost in the White Mountains. What makes an experience good or bad? Is it the experience itself, your circumstances that you were seemingly fated to, your judgment of those experiences? Or is the outcome more determined by the attitude with which you confront that experience? To help you learn a little bit about me, so we can find our points of relation, I'd like to read to you one of my journal entries from about 7 years ago. In May of 2019, I had a little bit of a hiccup in the White Mountains. I was hiking solo and attempting to summit Mount Isolation. I chose Mount Isolation because it earns its name. It's out there. It is in fact isolated, and that was the experience I was looking for. Hiking alone in new terrain, away from other people, creates a new layer to the experience. You're exploring your own limits, in a sense. It puts those deeper elements of you to the test. And as a result, hopefully, you get to know yourself a little bit better. So, I'm going to read 2 journal entries that I have surrounding that incident. The first is from the night before, and the second entry is a description of what happened to me that I recorded shortly after getting back to that motel room. Since writing these entries, I think I've only gone back and reread them once. I'm reading this to you essentially with a fresh set of eyes, and we'll see if we can relive that experience together. May 10th, 2019. The day before I embark on my next solo adventure north. Good news in the lab. They tell me they finally found a guy to replace me for my role in the grease room. I have been patiently waiting for the opportunity to spread my wings in the open chemistry lab environment. I learned a new test for orthophosphates using the automatic coloring instruments. I also purchased a bow and arrow yesterday. And yesterday I also had a deeply enlightening talk with my mother. And I began to finally get some dental work done. So I'm connecting with my mom, arming myself with a bow and arrow, and getting over my trepidations with attending dental appointments. Maybe you can relate to that. It's now day 3 of 3 of the pre-adventure sacrifice. This time, it's not alcohol, but the late night munchies I've been gunning after. Seems small in comparison, but it has been a troublesome habit that feeds subtly into other habits, especially as it affects my transition into sleep and the state of energy with which I wake. It was an anchor rather than a support, and so it must be cut free. I'm feeling excited for this trip to Mount Isolation. I had first heard about it from a guy named Joe, who would frequent Tom's Market in Coventry, while I managed the store. He was an insurance guy with an adventurous side that he let out on various excursions throughout the year. He had just come back from the Galapagos, and we talked about that and about my recent experiences hiking up north. He told me that this was the mountain to go to alone. Like him, I preferred the solo route. So here we are, the night before. Tomorrow, I will spend a few hours finishing some loose ends in the lab, and then I will purchase any Modest Mouse CDs left at Newbury Comic Shop. Perhaps grab a cigar and a coffee, and begin heading north. I figure I'll let fate decide where I sleep this evening. Practicing trusting myself to follow my gut when the time to make choices comes. Mentally prepared with a sacrifice, good nutrition, some reflection, and physically prepared with daily cardio and push-ups. What we consume becomes us. Everything before prepares us for what is now. The food becomes our cells. The idea, our thoughts. The seed becomes a plant. The unknown becomes known. The process... Oh, my cat's trying to get in the door. Come here, Max. The unknown becomes known. The process is what matters. The process of becoming. I am going to climb a mountain, but the whole process involves more than the mountain. In mythical terminology, part of me feels, in a real sense, that I am voluntarily venturing up a mountain to confront a dragon. The hero always is changed after a successful confrontation, claiming the fire, the powers, the head, etc. Into the nous, Greek word. Into the wild, bomb-ass movie. Into life, carrying with me a hope that the mountain will know what I'm seeking. That would be foreshadowing. I feel the breath of my ancestors, and with each step, I honor those that walked before me. I'm getting that warm resonance that climbs the spine and fills the soul. That tingle is a song felt throughout your cells. It happens when you sing to the life around you, and you hear the song returned back. So, day before the hike, I'm feeling great. I've put in the work, the prep work. I guess you can call it part of my personal ritual, where I prepared mentally, physically. I felt like I had sacrificed something ahead of time, so I can make some space for whatever came that was new, whatever the mountain had in store for me. And that brings us to the second entry. Okay, I mixed the days up. So that was the day before I drove to New Hampshire. This is the night before the hike. It's May 11th, and I'm just getting to my motel room. May 11th, 2019. 8 p.m., Jackson, New Hampshire. Putting down a very tasty home-prepared dinner in a room at a local lodge. A tub of baby spinach, grape tomatoes, carrots, olives, craisins, cranberry walnut chicken salad, and pumpernickel croutons. Holding on to the almonds for the hike tomorrow morning. Another score in a dope room. Second story with a small outside deck and balcony, looking out to a small lake in front of the nearby mountain peaks. Brought my guitar out to the back deck and lit a joint. There does not seem to be anybody else here. The day before Mother's Day, and just before tourist season. Boots are off. Tonight feels good. Tonight is also preparation for tomorrow. Planning to begin ascending into the forest at sunrise towards Mount Isolation. I do not have an accessible map on my phone, just paper, compass, and wits. My mission is to touch the top of that mountain tomorrow. Huh. That's right. I didn't buy GPS until after this incident. Getting to the Whites isn't so bad. Maybe 4 hours on a bad day. Past Chicora on the way in. Piper Trail. The path I had descended down drinking river water after summiting my first mountain and hitchhiking back. It is different with a car now. You don't have the same type of experience as a journey on foot, bike, trains, and buses. That's right, back when I didn't have a car, I used to have to take my bicycle to the train station. It was about 10 miles. Tie up the bike, get on a train to Boston. Then I'd take the bus from Boston to New Hampshire, get dropped off, and then follow some handwritten instructions on how to get to wherever I was staying. Back to the day before. I'm grateful to be here, alive, breathing, thinking, writing, smiling, living. Like Bobby, the cleaning guy at work, says, God is something inside me that I can't describe or define, but I can feel it, and I want more of it. More life. Through acts of creative exploration, we act as revolutionaries, making new territory out of the unknown. Maybe we will help lead some others forward along the way. It is the first step to becoming a leader, to awaken and balance our own inner potential first. I think that in doing so properly, we will find our common link between ourselves and others. This is the precursor to empathy. Empathy is the precursor to a better future. We are all fragments of the same mirror, reflecting self to self. Let hope override fear. I thank the stars for guiding me this far. I am standing on the shoulders of giants. May 12th, 2019. The incident. So as this begins, I'm already reflecting on the experience that I just endured. In my room again. Can't sleep. Haven't moved in hours. 3 a.m. Covered in cuts and bruises. My limbs hurt. My arms and legs are covered in cuts from rocks and ice and dead pines. Both my wrists are swollen, and I think the left one is fractured. The fronts of my legs below the knee are bloody and heavily bruised. I'm laying on a bed on my back with towels around my legs to keep the blood off the bed. I left the bathroom fan on and have been listening to it for several hours while I breathe and do not move. The heater is going as well, still set to 72 degrees. It's hard to write. It feels like my body wants to sleep, but it also refuses to. I need to muster the strength to turn the heat off. I'll get to that fan while I'm at it. There didn't seem to be many people out that morning. Only one other car parked along the side of Route 16 near the trailhead that I had picked on the map. I saw some light patches of melting snow early on in the hike. Closer to the tree line, there were many long stretches of rocky trail that were fairly congested with snow still. Some sections were a hassle, especially without snowshoes, but my size 13 backpacking boots worked well, and I didn't stop to pay the snow much mind. I always look forward to making it to the Alpine Zone, being exposed to vast sceneries in all directions. Trees have become low-lying shrubs and ferns. The switchbacks guide me up the ridge in between massive boulders. I follow the cairns up the exposed face and come to a T-shaped intersection. Mount Isolation is only a mile or two south from this point. I opt to head north towards the summit of Mount Bootspur first. Make it there by noon. I can see most of the Presidential Range from the top. I climb to the top of a large boulder, and I'm smiling. Mount Washington is just west. I can see the weather observatory at the summit, where apparently lots of crazy weather is reported. You would never know from where I was sitting, however, as there was no wind at all. Rare. Eerie. I was making great time and feeling good vibes on my descent back down the winding path by the cairns, towards the intersection marker I had previously passed, at the top of the Glen Boulder Trail. This is almost too easy, I thought, as I took a few rips of cannabis from my pipe. Signpost pointed south and said Davis Trail towards Mount Isolation, 1.5 miles. I began walking south. The trail lowered itself very slowly back towards the valley. I recall coming to a sort of opening. There had been snow reappearing again, but here, the snow seemed to be trapped, frozen in state, stopped from melting by the shape of the pines, a wall of which seemed to now be in front of me, like an army standing at its ranks. I see a set of snowshoe footprints that enter into what appears to be the continuation of the trail into the tree line and entering into the valley. I'm uncertain, but I tell myself that I'll find some blazes on the trees soon enough. And as long as the trail proceeds relatively south, I should be good. I walk towards the opening. Either side of the entrance were two large pines that stood almost as markers between two worlds. Boaz and Jachin. I walk into the snowy woods. The snow deepens slowly to a depth of 6 feet, covering any markers. The trees grew increasingly sharp and dead. The snow was mealy, and stepping was becoming hazardous. I followed the prints of snowshoes for about 45 minutes. At some point, the trail had become less obvious, and soon it seemed the prints were wandering throughout the woods aimlessly. They came to an intersection of sorts. I stood at a four-way crossing. The footprints I had trusted in suddenly went in several directions. I tried to the right, dead end. The prints looped back as well. I try to go downhill straight, but the dense pines prevent it. I move left now and circle down a small path next to a snowy ridge. The deep snow stops me here, too. It takes more time to get back to the intersection now, moving uphill. I decide to backtrack. The winding path I followed through the closely packed trees is no longer apparent. Perhaps I can move uphill and find a vantage point. No luck. There is no getting through the pines and the soft, thick snow that they contained. I stand now at the intersection, and in this moment, here, I feel the click. My heart is beating rapidly. I'm lost, alone, in the whites. I had to try and collect myself and make a plan. There was no reason to panic yet. I could get out of this. I hadn't gone too deep. I thought about moving downhill and eventually finding a river to follow out, but I also knew I would likely be moving deeper into the woods. I knew there was a highway east where my car was parked. I set my compass east and told myself that no matter what, I would keep moving in that direction. It was impossibly silent out there. I've never felt so isolated. Moving was a constant challenge. The terrain was wet and hilly. I considered making snowshoes, but realized that they would likely not make it between the pine trees. Yeah, these trees were very sharp and dense, and the snow being about 6 feet up, I'm just pulling my way through these densely packed pines. And I'm realizing that, like, the snowshoes, if I did try to throw something together quick, I imagine them just, smashing into trees, collapsing quickly. I just opted to keep on going. I aimed to walk the monorail between the trees, avoiding the furrows. I was in shorts, and my socks were getting drenched with cold snowmelt. Hours now began to pass as I used my compass and hiking pole to push east. My wrists gripped sharp pines to move my weight. Inch by fucking inch was perilous. After you fall up to your chest a dozen times and sink a leg and collapse many dozens more, your spirits begin to really get tested. I thought of my mom. It was Mother's Day. My dad. I thought about spending the night in the snow with the gear that I had. I thought about sitting there alone in the cold darkness and thinking about the pain I would be putting people who cared about me through if I didn't phone anyone this evening. No cell coverage. No guarantees anymore that I'd be making it out before sundown. I didn't know what the night would bring, or what it could bring, and I thought about what a lonely and intimate death I could potentially face, being exposed and isolated in the cold, dark uncertainty. My wrists ached. My legs were bleeding and swollen. My feet were ice. My throat was too dry to swallow any food. I stepped east. To avoid plunging through the snow, I focused my awareness on all of my extremities as they coordinated a balanced distribution of my weight through the mutant white jungle. That's where little rock climbing skills come into play. These sudden falls through the snow always caught me off guard, and I fell more often as exhaustion began to lead to racing thoughts. I spoke to myself, fortified my mind, had a moment where I began laughing, and I will never know fully why. I think I realized that my situation was shitty, but not too shitty, and I was handling it physically and mentally. Still, willpower is a finite resource. Turning a tight bend, I plant my foot on the monorail, and it gives way. I fall forward and sink to my chest. My shin strikes a hidden tree branch with all my weight, and grinds against it as I sink into the snow. I cry out in pain. I cry out to God. I had nothing else left. Spirit was weak. Willpower felt waning. Something activated within me. I became focused. My resolve to get out was restored. It was as if the wind had entered me, and it would animate my body if I didn't resist it. I covered my bleeding leg with a bandana and watched as my limbs took to work, making slow progress eastward. I put my body through hell, overriding the pain. I took action with all of my spirit. Minutes later, I saw what appeared to be a corridor leading downslope. Another illusion, perhaps. I did not let myself feel hopeful until I was about a dozen yards away and I could no longer help myself from the feeling. Another illusion. Yeah, at one point I made my way towards what looked like a clearing in the trees where the sun was bursting through. So I get closer and I rise up over a snowbank and then kind of slide down it into what looks like a little like meadow. But it was just water. My feet entered this soggy earth and just ice melt filled my boots. So I ended up crawling back over the snow mound, lying on my back. I had to take my socks off, wring them out, went through my backpack. Luckily, I had a couple of like plastic Stop and Shop bags, so I used them to make little scuba suits for my feet. Socks come off, wring them out. Bag with a little hole poked in the end of it goes right over the feet, and then the damp cold socks go over the bags. So I see again what could be an illusion. It's this, what looks like an opening in the trees, could be a trail. I did not let myself feel hopeful until I was about a dozen yards away and could no longer help myself from the feeling. Then I saw the 2 sets of snowshoe footprints. I had found a trail. I stood there. I breathed, seemingly for the first time since noon. I laughed. I cried. I may never have the vocabulary to adequately describe the relief, gratitude, and awe that comprised my emotions in that moment. But I wasn't free yet. I had to get off the mountain before dark. I began the snowy descent in my waterlogged boots, bloody shorts, and throbbing extremities. Tears blurred my vision, but they were difficult to stop at times. I was on a trail hiking now, instead of battling that alien world with all my power. Around 7, I made my way out towards a ridge, and I could see the road. The sun made its descent as I did, as if we were racing. The phoenix versus the dung beetle. By the time my boots left the rock of the mountain and landed on soft, hollow forest floor, I was dragging my body along with everything I had in me. At last, I came within sight of the trailhead. Before I walk out of the woods, I owe my respect to the place I walked into and the experience I partook in. I turn around and face the woods. A wind is blowing now for the first time. I spit into the palms of my hands and hold them up towards the remnants of the setting sun and the canopies of the trees. This is their domain. I tell my surroundings, thank you, and I can't hold back tears. I walked out onto the road. The sun had now completely disappeared. I looked left and saw my car parked along the roadside, about 100 yards away. As I approached, I kept pressing the car lock button on my keys. The sight of the headlights and the sound of the horn were sensations that warmed me. It was as if my car was alive and telling me that I was safe again, that I was home. I almost died. I saw and felt things that I did not know existed inside me before. I felt something from within activate and carry me onward. I felt something answer when I cried out. I don't know what God is, but I can feel it, and I must pursue it. We are told we cannot fully understand God, but the inner call towards something we label God is a reflection of the very thing itself, as it exists inside us, lying dormant but full of potential creative energy and love. It is Source, the thing that fuels us when our willpower and understanding show their limitations. By this, the path of pursuing God is simultaneously the path towards knowing oneself. Humility, respect, and gratitude. I found these treasures alone in the woods. This experience changed me. It made me a much more responsible hiker. It also made me a more confident and relaxed hiker, or person. I got to see how I respond when the situation gets tough. The difference between an ordeal and an adventure is your attitude. You determine the outcome. Whatever you're facing right now, today, that hero is absolutely alive within you. You can hear it, you can feel it. Let it guide you through this. Don't run from your pain. Create something from it. Don't hide. Act. Confront. Bring yourself forward. And something from above reaches down. It will help to carry you. Ask and you shall receive. Having had 7 years to reflect on this day, one of the deeper questions I always had was, why? Why wasn't I fully prepared? Why did I refuse to use GPS? Why did I follow that set of snowshoe footprints blindly into the valley? Was it carelessness, laziness, stupidity? I think the real answer is more frightening. Have you ever stood at the top of a cliff or a bridge, some ledge with a big drop? You approach the edge, you look out over it, and you stare into the abyss. And within yourself, you kind of perceive this quiet whisper, almost like something is calling you into it. Like, let go. Just release. Fall into me. It's not that you're actually contemplating jumping. It's more like a calling of something from the depths itself. There's a word for it in Japanese. I forget what it is. We don't have a word for it in English. But I think there was something in me that was guiding me towards having this experience. What do you think? Do you think things happen for a reason? Why are you here? I remember feeling a lot less anxious after having had this experience. Almost like I had seen more of myself. So now I could trust more of myself. And those constant what if questions your brain runs through, which is the hallmark of anxiety, those seem to slow down quite a bit. So, I don't know. If you're an anxious person, maybe try getting out there in nature for a bit. This all started for me with just taking nightly walks around the neighborhood just to cope with my anxiety. Things gotta start somewhere, and they gotta start small. Those small changes add up over time with persistence to become much bigger things. You set the pattern forth, make something a habit, and watch where it takes you. Almost like you're building a computer code and setting it out there. Anyway, thank you for listening. Thanks for being here. Thanks for letting me share some of my story. Looks like we've picked up a lot of new subscribers. So if you are new, welcome. I'm new too. Thank you again for stopping by, and I look forward to continuing these conversations.